We had some issues with feedback the last few times, so I just wanted to make sure.
What's your ETA?
She said she started in a little bit.
Our hope is to start directly after, or as soon as after, but some people had mentioned they thought it was around 10. So I'll give people a few more minutes and then we're going to get started. Okay? There is not a written statement coming out today. This photo, I believe, was emailed to everyone on the DA media group. If you didn't get that, email the DA web link and we can send that to you. Okay, we'll start in a few moments then.
No, I'm just not going to take a chance. My frequency always seems to have issues with interference, and I heard a little buzz a minute ago.
You all ready? Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today marks the close, the culmination of the Maxwell-Schallenberger cases and trials. Today, Kimberly Maurer was sentenced by Judge Bradford Charles. She received a sentence of life without parole and then a consecutive period of 10 to 20 years. The consecutive sentences were based on the endangering the welfare of a child charge, and that's based over the course of conduct, meaning the 10 years of malnutrition, abuse, and neglect that the two defendants would have inflicted on Maxwell. In all candor, the comments that I had, I said upstairs. I know many of you, if not all of you, were present, and the real purpose for today was to allow you to ask your questions in one totality. So I'll open it up for questions at that time.
There was testimony at trial that Max suffered recent and older head trauma. Does the Commonwealth have a theory on who inflicted the recent head trauma that was found?
So there is no actual set theory as to whether it was the stepmother, Kimberly Maurer, versus the father, Scott Schallenberger. Maxwell was found to have recent blunt force trauma to his head area, but he also had evidence of older, somewhat healed blunt force trauma, not only in the head, but also throughout his back and his extremities. When we talked to the pathologist, as well as Dr. Carter, who truly was an expert for children who unfortunately are starved and die, he had indicated that it can come from falling, it can come from slipping, it can come from an inflicted injury that then heals on its own. So there's no way to tell based on the older injuries or the more recent injuries who would have actually done it to Maxwell if it was inflicted versus if the child had tried to hold himself up, had tried to roll over, and perhaps had hit an area of the bed or the bed frame. What we can tell you is that the bottom of Maxwell's feet at the time he died, they were covered, they were caked in fecal matter, the actual bottoms of them. So there's no evidence that Maxwell ever got out of that bed and walked around. First of all, his body was so malnutrition that his bone density wouldn't have supported him getting up to walk. He couldn't have taken himself to the bathroom. He couldn't have gone to the window. He couldn't have made it to the door. But there's also no feces footprints anywhere in that room to indicate that Maxwell would have done that, even if physically he would have been able to do that.
Can you just repeat the sentencing again?
Sure. So today, Ms. Maurer received on count 1, which is first-degree criminal homicide. She received a sentence of life without parole. That's a mandatory sentence for a first-degree homicide. The jury found her guilty of multiple other counts. However, those counts merged for sentencing purposes. So she was sentenced today on count 1, first-degree murder, life without parole. She was sentenced on count 5, endangering the welfare of a child, meaning Maxwell. That count was charged as a felony course of conduct, meaning it wasn't one incident. It was a series of incidents that, from our allegations, what the jury found was over a period of approximately 10 years. And it was continued, growing, prolonged abuse, malnutrition, starvation. And then at the end of it, obviously, there was blunt force trauma that was inflicted within a day or two of his passing away. So on count 5, the endangering the welfare, and count 6, which was criminal conspiracy for endangering the welfare of Maxwell, the judge imposed the same sentence, 5 to 10 years of state incarceration. He imposed those consecutively to one another, meaning back to back, and then also consecutively to the life without parole. So in totality, it's a life without parole, and then 10 to 20 years consecutively to be imposed or served on top of that count 1 sentence.
Thank you.
Here, when Scott Schallenberger pled guilty and was immediately sentenced, his public defender, Brian Diedrich, did the talking, essentially. We didn't hear from Scott at all. We heard, although we couldn't really hear Kimberly this morning in the courtroom, but my sense is she was deflecting. I did hear one snippet where she said, I tried to do stuff, but Scott kept telling me I wasn't his mother and I couldn't do anything. Did Scott ever own any responsibility in your conversations or your dealings with him? Apparently, Kimberly has owned nothing.
Correct. So from the onset of the investigation, the question was, did these two act completely, implicitly, equally to one another, or was one more of a major proponent of abuse and one was more of a minor, I know what's happening, but I'm not stepping in? What we found through the 2 years between death and trial is that based on a review of the way the household functioned, based on the thousands upon thousands of pages of cell phone records, Facebook records, their interviews, Kimberly Maurer, for the majority of that household, was in control. She dictated how the finances were spent. She dictated the activities the children did. She was the one to do the grocery orders and the everyday to-day functions that you need to maintain a household. But she also dictated how those things occurred, when they occurred, who did what, and a lot of that was really at her hand. We found Scott was working upwards of 70, 80 hours a week right up until COVID, and he really wasn't home. He was working second and third shift. When he was home, he was asleep. And to some extent, he sort of washed his hands of anything other than bringing the finances back into the residence. So Ms. Maurer was the one applying for welfare benefits. So she did. She applied for medical benefits, including for Maxwell. She applied for food stamps, including for Maxwell. And that all occurred, she was still trying right up until the time of Maxwell's death. So when you look at who was in control of the overall household, of the relationship dynamic, for our end of things, it truly did appear to be her. Now, was a lot of that relevant for trial? Frankly, no. He wasn't sitting next to her at the table. It was a matter of how did she treat him? What did she say about him? And when you look at the text messages and the Facebook messages, it spoke for itself. She said horrible things. She cursed about that child. She bragged about abusing him. She bragged about how worthless he was, what a pain he was, what a joy the other children were. We found for a period of 9 years, there wasn't a single pleasant comment, nothing loving, nothing sweet, ever directed by her about Maxwell. And when you talk about the things that were said upstairs in court, I did take some notes. So she said that she tried to call children and youth and that was never acted upon. That never happened. We had hundreds of pages of children and youth records. We met with children and youth in preparation for trial. She never called. She was present a few times when they were called to the home by other people, but she really washed her hands of it even then. So that never happened. When she talked about how she took Maxwell to the beach and to Knoebels and the foods he liked and how she made him a Halloween costume, we went through tens of thousands of pages of Facebook records, cell phone records, and these span years upon years. There's not a single piece of evidence that ever supports that happened. We have it of her and the other children. We have nothing of Maxwell. In her phone, we found, I would say, 10,000 photos?
Yes.
Approximately. There was one photo of Maxwell, and we showed it during trial. It was Halloween right after they moved to Annville, so approximately October 2017. Every other child, including friends of her two oldest biological children, had a costume that looked like a normal Halloween, and they're in the backyard. Maxwell has no costume. He's standing approximately 3 feet from that group of smiling, happy children, and the look in his face is just sheer dejection. He knows. Even 3 years before his death, he knows, and he's forced to look at and watch that I am different, I am treated differently, and those children are loved and I am not. And then not only did she take the picture, she sent it on Facebook to friends of hers and then laughed about how she couldn't post it publicly. So when you talk about the things that she said upstairs, there is no evidence that Scott was tracking her, that he was watching her inside the house. They had cameras on Maxwell, and she used those to taunt Maxwell. She bragged about that in the text messages. She wanted those cameras because she was afraid he would break out. She was afraid he would get free from the room. And when we talk about the growing culmination of abuse, he started out in that front middle bedroom, one hook on the door. That wasn't good enough. So then they had to move him to that back bedroom and isolate him further. And then at that point, we go to 3 hooks in the door, and not only 3 hooks, but now we're gonna cover the windows. We're gonna screw the windows shut so he couldn't look out if he wanted to. He had no light bulbs, nothing. So in terms of the comments she made upstairs, there was no evidence of any of the things that she said. It frankly did appear to be a last-ditch effort for some measure of leniency or mercy from the court on the day where she knows she will finally have to face the consequence for the actions she took. And she uttered a phrase upstairs about how looking back, even now she can see no way out. If that doesn't speak volumes about the utter lack of grasp on reality this defendant has, I don't know what else will. We're sitting here over 2 years after the death of this little boy. The condition of that room, the way he died, the manner in which he died, everything she took from him. And you saw it again today. There hasn't been a single tear of remorse for Maxwell. For herself, yes. For him, none. Even if someone doesn't know that little boy, if you show them for the first time a photo of how he died, I can guarantee you're going to get sobs. That person will give you an emotional, visceral reaction. And even sitting here today, she couldn't do it. So I hope that answered your question.
Do you know if her attorneys are going to appeal?
I believe they are going to appeal. What they had referenced today is that they've already prepared it. They plan to file it relatively soon. And that was why when the judge asked, is she able to go back up to the state correctional facility, they said yes, they're already ready for it. Other questions?
Are you satisfied with the conclusion of this case?
I am proud of the jury's verdict. I am proud of the people standing to the right and the left of me. I'm proud of the witnesses and the evidence. I'm proud of the case that we tried. I'm extremely proud of the law enforcement investigation, and when I sat upstairs in court, how they need to be commended. The Annville Township Police Department did a wonderful job initially documenting that scene and realizing that there was something here that they knew was horrific and bad and needed county detectives. And they made that decision almost instantaneously. And from the moment that our detectives arrived on scene, the 2 detectives next to me, Detective Dave Schaefer and Sergeant Todd Hirsch, they are 2 of the most wonderful police officers we could ever have. We are so blessed to have them. And the work that they did, we are standing here today, we have an outcome today because they never gave up and they fought. And for 2 years, the goal was, it's not justice. There's no bringing this child back. There's no giving him Christmas. There's no giving him a birthday. There's no giving him a future. He's never going to know what it's like to graduate from high school. He's not going to know what it's like to get married. He's not even going to know what it's like to go to prom. All these things that a child, as they get older, looks forward to. And you think about a future, especially in this community. This is a small town. For the most part, I go to a grocery store, I run into 5 people I went to high school with, or someone that worked with my mom or my dad. We don't expect things like this here. And when you look at what happened to this little boy in this small rural community, it's just shocking. So when we talk about are we satisfied? I think we tried the best case we could have done. I think we gave the jury everything we could have done. And the 3 men standing next to me, I can never thank them enough for the efforts that they gave me. Attorney Edwin McCann, he doesn't work in Lebanon County, he works in Montgomery County. He's the first assistant there to Kevin Steele. I had sat down with Attorney McCann when this case first came in, and I wanted input, I wanted guidance. And the more that I talked to Attorney McCann, and I asked him, I don't really know what to do with this, I'm gonna try this case on my own. And he didn't even blink an eye. He said, I'll come up there, I'll try that with you. He doesn't get paid to be here, he takes his personal time to be here. And this is not an easy thing to do. This is thousands of hours of preparation. And these men never once said it's too much, it's too hard, they never balked at it. And I can't thank them enough. So am I satisfied? I think we have as good of an outcome as you can get. It's not justice. There is no justice in this. There's no bringing this child back. There is no undoing what occurred.
What do you want the community to take away? I know you've referenced it before, but now that we have finality, what do you want the community to take away so that we never have another Maxwell?
So I know that His Honor spoke about homeschooling and supervision, and I can tell you, we did spend a good amount of time with the Anvil-Cleona School District in preparation for trial. And we learned a lot about what it is to homeschool a child and the differences. There is supervision. The difference is, in this case, there's a process to homeschool a little boy or a little girl. And you have to go to the school, and you have to sign up, and you have to register. And every year there's a review, and every year there is someone to check and make sure that the things that should be done are getting done. It's the same thing for cyber school. The difference is with Maxwell, that was never done. So all of his siblings, all 5 of them went to Anvil-Cleona. They should have. Every single day they played sports, they did extracurricular activities. He didn't. And when they should have enrolled him and they were told to enroll him, they didn't. And over the years, again, he just got locked away and the abuse got worse and worse. So we found no evidence that she ever homeschooled him, that she gave him workbooks, that there was ever anything ever done for Maxwell, other than she told us that repeatedly. So when you talk about a community perspective, I think the outpouring of support and love that the community showed for his death, I think it does show that we are a very tight-knit community that is shocked and horrified by the death of a child. And there's hope in that. There's absolutely hope in that. But when you talk about what can the community do, get involved. Absolutely get involved. There are so many charities you can volunteer with. There are so many children that need foster homes. There are so many children out there that we can save from being a Maxwell. And the easiest way to do it is to get involved. Is to put your time and your energy and your money behind the cause. And I think that is a huge thing. And frankly, the other aspect of it publicly, just to talk about, is child line. So we have people ask, well, what if we suspect or what if we think that we know somebody like Maxwell? So child line, you can make a phone call, you can report online, and it's done anonymously. So when we do an investigation based on a child line, we don't go to the alleged abuser, we don't go to the perpetrator and say, so-and-so told us. We just do an investigation and it's dark. If there's nothing to it, it's closed out. If there's something to it, we investigate it. Children and youth gets involved. Social services can become involved. And it doesn't have to be a simply criminal matter. It can just be this child needs help. So from a community standpoint, be aware, be informed, be involved. Not only through volunteer work, but also if you suspect a child is being abused, do a child line, call your local law enforcement. Because you would almost rather have someone be too involved than not involved at all. Anything else? So if no one has any other questions, we're done for today. I thank you all very much for being here and for your time.
It's really hot.